go ahead and begin the workshop session. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome Taysir Mirani, who will be presenting this evening's workshop. Taysir is an academic manager with the British Council in Saudi Arabia. She has been in the education field for 20 years, teaching both adults and young learners. Additionally, she also has a strong background in teacher training and professional development and is a Cambridge Delft tutor. She is particularly familiar with the Saudi educational context, having worked in a variety of different institutions in the kingdom. In addition to this practical experience, she has also completed research around educational models used in Saudi Arabia, which is currently under review for publication in the Journal of Education and Learning. Taysir, you are more than welcome to begin your workshop at this time. Thank you very much.
Hello, thank you very much, and good evening to everyone. I am delighted to participate in this great event. As you can see, our topic in this workshop is about educational reform and what implications may be involved in this reform. This presentation is particularly relevant to those of us who teach in the local context. I'm not sure if you can hear me loud and clear. Could you just confirm that, please?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, so I'll begin by introducing myself. I work at the British Council, but before we begin the workshop, I would just like to state that the information shared in this presentation and on the following slides is based on my own reading and research. So the opinions expressed are not those of the British Council. So I'll begin by explaining the reasons for the growing demand for education in Saudi Arabia. Next, I'll move on to talk a little bit about the Human Development Index, or the HDI. After that, I'll focus on issues with student performance and international assessments, and the factors that may hinder successful educational reform. Then I'll be looking at an example of a local university. So we'll talk a little bit about higher education. And finally, I'll offer some solutions to help with educational reform. And I hope we can have like some kind of interaction in the chat box. So I'll ask you guys a couple of questions, and then if you could just post your answers in the chat box, that would be great. And last but not least, there will be a question and answer session. So please feel free to pop your questions into the chat box during the workshop, and then we can discuss these during the Q&A session. All right, so there is definitely a high demand for education in the kingdom. Statistics showed that approximately 7,600,000 children were of school age. These are statistics from 2017. And 23% of these children were migrant children in Saudi Arabia. It's important to note that there is a large migrant worker community in the kingdom, and this composes 75% of the Saudi Arabian workforce. And the presence of such a large community may be due to the high standard of living in the country, which will be explained briefly on the next slide. A 2019 report by the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs identified Saudi Arabia as a host of 13.1 million migrants, and this is the second highest after the United States. So this was statistics from last year. So these statistics in general show that there is a high demand for educational attainment by both nationals and non-nationals, if you can see the numbers here. Moving on to the Human Development Index. So the Human Development Index, established by the United Nations Development Program, measures a country's average achievement in key dimensions of human development. And these are life expectancy, you can see the blue line here, and being knowledgeable, basically, which is education, and the standard of living, or the gross national income, which is in red over here. So the UNDP report in 2018 placed Saudi Arabia in the very high human development category, positioning it at 39 out of 189 countries and territories. So the country's high GNI, in red over here, may explain why there is a large migrant worker community in the kingdom. Now, from 1990 to 2017, the country has made substantial progress with an HDI increase in green, if you can see over here in green. Yeah, just there was something wrong with my mouse, sorry. Yeah, so the country did make some substantial progress in the HDI index from 1990 to 2017. And even though the gross national income remained fairly steady in the same period, there was a significant increase in the education index, being knowledgeable during the same period. So, and being knowledgeable, according to the United Nations Development Program, is the expected years of schooling for children of school entering age. That's number one, and years of schooling for adults age 25 and above. So it could be that does include those who are pursuing higher education. So that has increased. That has increased. So this is the appropriated government expenditure on education last year and this year. So last year it was 17.4%, and this year it's higher. Education will continue to be one of the country's top priorities, in particular after the announcement of Vision 2030. And two of Vision 2030's overarching objectives are to grow and diversify the country's economy and increase employment by developing human capital. Now, the Human Capital Development Program is one of Vision 2030's programs, and it aims to improve education and training at all stages, so from early education to continuous education. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about international student assessments. And just something to mention is because there is a high demand for education and because of Vision 2030, the kingdom will continue to place education at its forefront. Now, some international exams that benchmark and measure students' abilities are exams such as TIMSS, which is the Trends in International Mathematics and Science Study. Also an exam called PEARLS, which is Progress in International Reading Literacy, and PISA, which is the OECD program for international student assessment. Now here I'm going to share a snapshot of the latest PISA results. So I'm just going to focus on one of the international student assessments out of the three that I just mentioned. Now this test is actually administered by the OECD, which is the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. PISA is an exam taken by 15-year-old students to measure their ability to use their reading, mathematics, and science knowledge and skills to meet real-life challenges. And this exam occurs every 3 years. Saudi Arabia participated in PISA for the first time in 2018. Now, public school students achieved an average PISA score of 386. That's just the average score for reading, mathematics, and science. This was noticeably lower than 488, which was the average score of other participating countries. In addition to this result, there were no top achievers in any of the subjects. And the share of low achievers in reading and mathematics was high compared to the respective low achievers or low achiever average shares of 23 and 24. Now, it's important to note that these results do not mirror the performance of students from other types of schools in the kingdom, such as private Arabic schools, international schools, or community schools. So clearly these results need to be analyzed in order for the country to be able to achieve the goals of Vision 2030 and to be able to improve the country's human capital. So in the chat box, looking at the results of PISA, and keeping in mind that this was the first time for Saudi Arabia to participate in an international assessment exam, or in an international assessment like this, in your opinion, what do you think the reasons are for this low performance? So I'll just give you maybe a minute or less than a minute to type your thoughts in the chat box. So if you think about, maybe some of you actually studied in schools here in Saudi Arabia. Maybe you have some reasons as to why these results were, or these scores were low. Okay, let's say 30 seconds, 30 more seconds. I'm going to write a letter. I'll just give you a clue. Okay, right. Okay, maybe not being familiar with standardized testing. Yeah, that could be a reason. Thank you. I'm also thinking of a word or a phrase, and it starts with this letter. So I'm just going to type that. I'll pop it right in the chat box there. Something that starts with R. R-O. Okay, R-O. Ah, reliability. Mm. Oh, so I think you mean test reliability and validity. Okay. All right. Okay, so thank you. Thank you for participating. Right, so actually what I was thinking of, and this is based on research, and also from my own experience, I was thinking of this, and not just I was thinking of this, but this is also from research. So rote learning. So from my own experience as a student here in international schools, because I did go to international schools in Saudi Arabia, so from my own experience as a student here in international schools, and also as a teacher in a few private Arabic and private international schools, and now my experience as a mother of school children who are also studying here, I can see that rote learning is very common. And rote learning means to memorize something by repetition and recall. So although there may be a few benefits, I'll just minimize this chat box here. Ah, yes, memorization. Yep. Okay. So although there may be a few benefits to memorization and recall, such as when recalling new words of a foreign language or memorizing parts of a diagram, it has actually been established over the years that rote learning or memorization does not develop cognition. Thus, a higher order thinking skills, such as critical thinking skills and analytical thinking, are not enhanced through the use of rote learning. Okay. So, both the World Bank and the OECD have acknowledged that rote learning or memorization by repetition and recall do not enhance students' cognition. And cognition is an important aspect when developing human capital. And again, we're linking human capital back to Vision 2030. Historically, it was not until 1925 that an organized system of education was introduced in Saudi Arabia. And prior to this, there was a traditional educational system known as Kutab in the Arabian Peninsula, which focused on Arabic literacy and memorization of the Quran. And this method of rote learning was then transferred to the new organized educational system. Romanowski 2018 highlighted that rote learning is generally encouraged in school education systems in GCC or the Gulf Cooperation Council countries and other Arab countries. They further stated that students are usually not taught how to think critically or engage in reflection and are merely recipients of knowledge. So orienting itself from the rote learning of curriculum content remains one of the main challenges in the Saudi Arabian educational system, and this was stated by Patrick 2014. There is a list of references at the end of this presentation that I'll show you if you would like to read further about this topic. And Prokop 2003 stated that attempts are being made to promote analytical thinking and reduce rote learning in Saudi Arabia. So there are attempts being made. Now, I would like to add here that it is common from my experience for educational models to be borrowed from the West and to be used in private schools, language institutes, and universities in the kingdom. In a quantitative study of examining cultural differences between generations in Saudi, Bukhari et al. 2019 showed that borrowed Western curricula and educational systems do not ensure effective learning in GCC countries. An example of these borrowed models are American and British curricula and textbooks. Romanowski et al. Stated that since students are not used to a rote learning culture, processing information that requires high levels of cognition, which is a characteristic of Western educational products, is a challenge. So considering that modern tasks require analytical thinking and critical thinking skills, this challenge, even though it is a challenge, it's still a necessary one. It's very important to be implemented here in Saudi. Now, something else that actually, based on research, could have had an impact on the results of PISA, other than rote learning, is cultural dimensions. So learning is a cultural activity, and it does not occur in isolation, as stated. So culture needs to be considered when borrowing educational models from the West. Professor Geir Hofstede is a professor in organizational anthropology, and he provided a body of knowledge and literature linking society and education to the national culture of a country. So according to Hofstede, national culture is divided into 6 dimensions. Now for this presentation, 2 of these dimensions will be discussed, and these are power distance and individualism. And these were chosen because there is a direct correlation between these 2 dimensions and rote learning. What is striking are the significant differences between power distance and individualism when comparing Saudi Arabia to Western countries such as the United Kingdom and the United States. Now, power distance refers to the extent to which inequality is perceived and accepted by society. So in an educational setting, a low PDI, like the ones we see here for the United Kingdom and the United States, indicates that inequalities are accepted. And this means that high power distant cultures, like what we see here in Saudi, are teacher centered, where the teacher is seen as the guru of knowledge and the culture is strictly disciplined. It's the teacher who speaks and the students who listen. In education, if we talk about individualism now, individualism means that it's expected of students to speak up. And individualist societies view education as a tool that helps students learn how to learn. And this was also stated by Marshall 2019. Now, Luce 2008 stated that self-reliance, autonomy, and uniqueness are factors of individualism. In education, collectivism is the opposite of individualism, and it's where learner autonomy is not promoted and students are less independent. So according to Hofstede's chart, students in Saudi Arabia fall into the collectivist category, hence the low score of 25 for individualism. And this means that students speak only when permitted, are not autonomous learners, and are less self-reliant. However, there are arguments that in the era of globalization, cultural orientations are becoming less important. And it has been observed that young Saudi Arabians are embracing independence and individualism. This was stated by Al-Ghatami, 2013. There is a fear of generalizations being made from a specific sample during data analysis using this model that was provided by Hofstede. Marshall 2019 highlighted that several researchers have critiqued Hofstede's data because the information might not reflect the different demographic groups or the recent changes in political environments. And as Bukhari stated, that cultural differences change with time. So fear of generalizations using Hofstede's model may also be true when considering the social and economic changes that have been a result of Vision 2030. Now, my experience of growing up and living in Saudi Arabia leads me to agree with critics of Hofstede's model in that cultural differences can change with time, and these changes may be positive. I've witnessed developments such as women being allowed to drive in 2018, in addition to other social changes due to the kingdom's Vision 2030. However, for education to be effective when borrowing educational models from the West, the implications of rote learning and cultural dimensions will still need to be considered. So if we talk about the English language proficiency, or if we talk about English language proficiency, as you know, school children study English, but they're introduced to it depending on the type of school they attend. So for example, in public schools, English is taught from the 4th grade or year 4, whereas in private schools, it's taught from grade 1 or year 1. Now, the data that you see here is data showing IELTS scores across Saudi Arabia. And the IELTS test is an English language proficiency test. There are 2 versions for it, the academic module and the general training module. Now, a lot of candidates are Saudi Arabian candidates and children of expatriates who have studied in local schools. I'd like to highlight that reading and writing is the most challenging for KSA test takers. As you can see, the scores are lower than speaking and listening. And that's for both the academic module and the general training module. And globally, we can see that for Arabic speakers, so I put some arrows here just to show, I'm sorry if this is not clear enough, but for Arabic speakers globally, reading and writing are also the most challenging. So not just in Saudi Arabia. Now, when we come to talk about universities, in your opinion, again, if you could in the chat box, answer this question, and what do you think is the major impact of the previous factors on the performance of university students or graduates, even when they go to, into the workplace? So factors such as rote learning, cultural dimensions like power, distance, and individualism, and English language proficiency. So these 3 factors, what do you think the major impact of these 3 factors are on the performance of university students? So I just want to give you maybe a minute or so just to pop your ideas into the chat box if you want. Thank you. So do you feel that university students do struggle when they start, uh, when they, yeah, when they start their university studies or during um, the university years? Do you feel that they struggle with anything in particular? Hmm. Depends on the university program. Yes, preparatory year programs, yes. Different, okay, academic language, yes. Okay, very nice. Okay, great. 30 more seconds. Very nice. I can see some nice ideas. So if you would like, please, whoever participated, to just elaborate a little bit more. So they would not need to perform at the level they should be at. So what do you think they lack in? What do you think they need? And 21st century skills, if you could just elaborate what you mean by that. Great contributions, everyone. Thank you. Okay. Lovely. All right. Thank you for the contributions and support in order to be able to. Yes, yes. Okay. Okay, great. Great. So yes, it does depend on the university program. So some universities do have a PYP program. They do offer remedial courses. Okay, academic language, definitely. Academic language is different than what students are exposed to at school. Yes. Yes, and students do struggle at the beginning. They do not have the skills that are required in order to help them perform at the level that they should be at. So they need study skills, yes. Express themselves, social skills, maybe, yes. Some students need to be independent learners, yes, and to be autonomous, yes. Lack of reading comprehension, yes. All very relevant. Yeah, great, great, great ideas. Thank you. Great. Okay. So these are some of the uh, items that I have here from research and also from my own thoughts. So yes, we're all on the same page, pretty much, yes. So in terms of higher education, Hamdan 2017 showed that westernizing universities by copying American and European curricula and employing Western educated faculty is a current trend in Saudi education. An example is King Fahd University of Petroleum and Minerals, KFUPM. It's a public university that has a Western educated and diverse international faculty. So that doesn't mean that all of the professors or staff members are actually from the West, but the majority of them the majority of them are educated in the West. I'm just going to check the chat box. Emotional intelligence, yes. Reading skills, scanning and skimming, yep. Okay, great. So American textbooks are mostly used across most disciplines at KFUPM, and the language of instruction is English. However, studying from textbooks that foster cognition and analytical thinking is a challenge for students who have been immersed in a rote learning culture during their school years. To remediate skill deficiencies, KFUPM also has a one-year bridging program known as the preparatory year, like a lot of universities here do in Saudi Arabia. And its main aim is to help students transition smoothly from secondary school with a specific focus on English language proficiency, mathematics, and study skills. There was some research done by Yushao and Omar, and in their literature, they showed that the lack of communication skills also prevents students from meeting the objectives of their university studies. So this study does support, yes, the importance of the preparatory year program. In addition, Maroon et al. Stated that a social skills program was added at KFUPM to the one-year program with the aim of empowering students with skills that will help them to be successful job applicants in the future. I'm just checking the chat box. 1 second, please. Okay, right. Okay, great. Yes. All right. Now, it's important to note that in addition to joining local universities, there is a significant number of Saudi Arabian students and migrant children who do pursue tertiary education abroad. So, for example, in the academic year of 2018-2019, 84% of 37,000 students pursued tertiary education in the United States. And this data is from Statista and also from the World Education Services. Now, in the same academic year, Saudi Arabia was recorded as the top of 14 Middle Eastern countries that sent students to the United Kingdom for higher education. And this was recorded as 8,125 students. So these are a lot of students going abroad, studying in Western countries. However, the question still arises as to how well prepared these students are, both language-wise and cognitive-wise, when pursuing tertiary education in the West. So we've got local universities following Western curricula. We have students also pursuing their higher education in the West, obviously being exposed to Western curricula, but they are struggling to some extent. Right. Okay. Now, in the chat box, in your opinion, what do you think the practical measures are that could be taken in schools to help develop human capital in order for Saudi Arabia to help achieve its human capital development program aim of Vision 2030? It needs to start from schools, not at universities. So what practical measures can be taken in schools to help develop human capital? Great, I can already see some contributions. Excellent. Okay, so let's say 1 or 2 minutes, or maybe less. Excellent, excellent. Interesting. Okay, let's say 1 more minute. Interesting. "30 seconds. Wonderful. Yeah. 10 seconds. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So very nice. Establishing a collaboration between higher education and kindergarten to, from kindergarten all the way to 12th grade school systems. Okay. Yeah. So there needs to be that conversation Or maybe it's the ministry needs to ensure that the curricula is linked. Yeah. Okay, and more critical thinking based learning, more critical thinking skills introduced in schools. Yes, teaching students how to be independent learners and autonomous, more involved in the actual goals. So I think you mean, Rehanna, students need to be more involved in the goals. It's not just teachers teaching, the students are teaching the plan, it's actually involving the students themselves. I think that's what you mean. You can confirm that, Rehanna, no problem. Bridging the gap between what schools teach, yes, and what students really need to survive in the outside environment, yes. That will definitely help develop or improve human capital. More prepared and ready, Rihanna. Teacher education programs that will support teachers with the skills they need to develop these specific aspects in student learning. Yes, the MOE has to be part of the collaboration. Yep. Okay, thank you for confirming, Rihanna. All right, excellent. Yes, thank you very much, everyone. Well done. I love your collaboration and interaction. Great. Okay, so Spring says that human capital economic theories shape behavior and knowledge to better cater to corporate needs. So in the context of education, what this means is these are highlighted in teaching two types of skills, cognitive and soft skills. So global corporatization of education embraces human capital economic theories by incorporating skills for the workplace in school curricula. So this will theoretically lead to a stronger global labor market. Now, there has to be some research that needs to be done just to ensure, because there are some critics who say there is no link between incorporating these kinds of skills in schools and developing human capital. So I think, in my opinion, just to be a little bit critical, I think there needs to be some more research done to see if actually incorporating these kinds of skills in schools does actually have a positive effect on human capital. Cognitive skills are intended to broaden the capabilities of the human mind. And developing soft skills or non-cognitive skills in the early years of child development may be a prerequisite for acquiring cognitive skills. Now, according to Maroon et al., communication, problem solving, and negotiation skills are examples of soft skills. And these soft skills have been identified as developmental areas for students in GCC countries. In addition to the lack of focus on soft skills, particularly in the Saudi Arabian education system, this has been recognized by the country's youth. So even young Saudi Arabians have recognized that actually they lack these soft skills. So to accommodate the social and economic changes in the country, it's important to incorporate cognitive and soft skills in the educational system, but even from early on, not just in higher education organizations. It needs to be from schools, from when the students are, from when they are in school. Okay. And like I said, some critics do challenge the widely held view that expansion and provision of education systems do indeed improve economic performance. There is a question of one size fits all when considering human capital theory. Now, this is because social and cultural factors differ in each country, and education is influenced by these factors. So the concept of human capital theory succeeding in all countries is controversial. Now, someone suggested teacher training. So let's talk about in-service teacher education. So I do have a question here. And my question, actually, I didn't write it, but my question is, so what kind of training do you have in mind? When we think about school teachers and we think about Vision 2030 and we think about developing human capital and thinking about rote learning and cultural dimensions, what kind of teacher training sessions do you think should be offered in schools? I'll give you 1 or 2 minutes. just in the chat box, please. Okay, let's see. Nice ideas. One more minute, maybe less. Oh, there are so many ideas, definitely. Yeah. If you could share maybe one. What would you prioritize if you were in charge of training teachers across country? You were in charge of not training them, but actually setting the training program. What would you prioritize? Takes place in countries. Okay. Okay. All right. Great, great, great. Okay, I'm conscious of the time, so I'm going to start reading out your suggestions. Okay. I'm sure you can see it already, but it's always nice kind of like to talk them through. So curriculum development, all right, assessment practices, e-learning, and how to give students feedback. Yes, and I agree. Feedback, giving constructive feedback is key, and delayed feedback is useless. Feedback is very important, and it needs to be done as soon as possible, or else it just loses its meaning. And it also needs to be constructive. And ideally, when a student does work on their work after feedback, ideally it would be beneficial for the student if the student shows the teacher the work again, and the teacher just checks if the student actually did follow the advice that was given in the feedback. Culturally responsive teaching, okay, training that takes place in their country, so in the teacher's own country, and this training, I understand, and this training meets the school requirements. Okay. How to support student learning, and we can link that. Yes, supporting student learning, feedback could also come under that. Also, maybe being autonomous as well, supporting students so that they learned how to learn. Okay, nice ideas. Supporting, I think I missed something. Okay, supporting diverse students' needs. Yes, yes. And we usually do have mixed abilities in our classrooms. Yes. And how to manage a mixed ability class is always a challenge. So teachers would need to be trained. Yes, would need that training. What happens about student learning, technology, using technology effectively, encourage to support students. Yes, use of technology. Teacher presence and what it means, whether face-to-face or online. Formative and summative assessments. Okay. And obviously, because what we're all going through because of the pandemic, the nature of our jobs, has changed, definitely. We're also learning now how to become effective online teachers. And I'm sure that a lot of us are experimenting different things to try with their students and to see what's effective and what isn't in an online setting. So yeah, training with regards to online teaching, yes. Okay, and assessments. Nice. Now, if we think about Vision 2030 and we think about the human capital, developing human capital, what I was thinking, or what I wanted to suggest, was this. And you might already be familiar with Bloom's taxonomy. So what I do suggest is training school teachers to incorporate elements of Bloom's taxonomy in their lessons. And this may help in improving students' performance in school, later at university, and eventually in the workplace. So we've got Bloom's taxonomy, which is composed of lower order thinking skills and higher order thinking skills. And so what activities do you think promote higher order thinking skills or promote cognitive or critical thinking or analytical thinking? If you think about your own students, what activities do you think might promote higher order thinking skills? And I do have some examples, right? Difference between being able to recognize, yes, yeah. So so I think incorporating elements of Bloom's taxonomy um, in teacher training sessions will definitely be will be. I'm not going to say definitely because research needs to be done, but I think might be helpful. So is that a research paper on HOTS, on higher order thinking skills, I think? Okay. So if we look at these over here, the ones that are at the top are the higher order thinking skills. And these are examples of what you could do with your students. So if you want to read more on Bloom's taxonomy.
We can't see.
Oh.
If you're showing us Bloom's taxonomy, we can't see it.
Oh, you can't. Oh, my goodness. I am actually. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Adia. Okay. All right. Oops. I'm going to share my screen again. Okay. Can you see it now?
Yes, we can see it.
Yeah. Now. Okay, great. Thanks. Sorry, I was just going on and on and on. I'm very sorry. Thank you. Okay. Oops. I did that again. All right then. Yeah. So I was saying that I suggest that training school teachers to incorporate elements of Bloom's taxonomy might help in improving students' performance in school, later at university, and eventually in the workplace. And these are just some ideas of what students can do. So when we think about activities, when we're planning our lessons, we can keep these verbs actually in mind because this is what we want our students to do in the lesson, or maybe even after the lesson, or maybe before the lesson, if we're following a flipped classroom approach, for example. So the higher the higher we go, the more challenging these activities are for our students. And training teachers to do this will help our students develop their cognitive abilities. So one example would be, as a second language teacher, I would say, if we look at remembering, we could think of teachers teaching learners to recite commonly used English phrases. Okay, that's just remembering, or rote learning, memorizing. And then we've got understanding, so they need to realize when and how these phrases are used. And then they can apply it when working in pairs, so the students role play using phrases in everyday situations. And then they analyze, so the students are able to group the phrases into different categories. So which phrases do we use when we want to greet someone, when we ask questions? Which phrases do we use for a request, for a complaint? So here they're analyzing, so we can think of an activity for them to do, to analyze these phrases, and then to evaluate. So the students are able to assess different messages written in English and put forward better or clearer ways to express what is being said. And then creating, and the students can create a written conversation between two people in English. So the higher we go, the more challenging it does become for students. I'm just checking the chat box 1 second. Okay. Yeah. Develop skills that will support students achieving the learning outcomes in a particular course or program. Yes. Now, the implications of rote learning, the cultural dimensions of power, distance, and individualism, the English language proficiency gap, and inadequate teacher training need to be taken into consideration to ensure that there is positive educational reform in line with Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030. Now, studies in the Saudi Arabian University by Al Nofal 2018 analyzed teacher-prepared questions in relation to Bloom's taxonomy. And Bloom's taxonomy is referred to widely in educational planning. And like we said, cognition is divided into lower order and higher order thinking skills, but the latter requires deeper learning and a greater degree of cognitive processing. This was stated by Adams 2015. Now, the World Bank 2020 stated that in late adolescence and in early adulthood, higher order cognitive skills are regularly developed. But they also say that critical thinking and problem solving can be developed at a younger age. So this is my argument here, is that we need to try to incorporate these kinds of activities even with primary students. So going back to Saudi Arabian public schools, around 75% of the teachers, in comparison to approximately 90% in the United States and the United Kingdom, say that they feel that professional development activities have a positive impact on their teaching practices. Now, this data is from a 2018 OECD report. This is not a low percentage, 75%. However, the question arises as to whether teachers implement what they have been exposed to during training sessions, and if in fact training sessions do address teachers' actual needs. In addition, some teachers may not see the value in activities that promote analytical thinking and critical thinking skills due to the historic culture of rote learning. Moreover, recent statistics show that 62% of public school teachers stated that they always or frequently give tasks that develop students' critical thinking. However, the results of PISA did not mirror this. And like I mentioned before, it was the first time for Saudi Arabia to participate in this exam. And the results were really low. And this contradicts to teachers' perceptions in Saudi in public schools. Al-Manakra and Evers 2020 highlight that attempts such as raising teacher awareness are not enough. They claim that for Vision 2030 to be executed effectively, an attempt such as this will need long-term funding and will need to undergo ongoing evaluation. Further to this, it has been stated that Saudi Arabian culture is predominantly one of uncritical submission to authority. So this submission is in all social, educational, political, and domestic aspects, and may have a bearing on education. So we need to change teachers' mindsets. There needs to be a focused teacher training program. And I'm talking about school teachers here. Now, according to the literature, transition from rote learning to a more learner-centered approach in the educational system is problematic for Saudi Arabian students because rote learning is embedded in the country's culture. So as a result, this may be an obstacle to the kingdom's plan for educational reform. So, yeah, and the source, sorry, I didn't show you the source. The source is right there. And like I said, there is a reference list. So to conclude, in conclusion, this examination of information and data indicates that investing in human capital to achieve successful results may be a challenge for Saudi Arabia. Several private schools and universities borrow educational models from the West. In addition, the government benchmarks its public schools' performance with Western international testing bodies, and achievements are low. Cultural dimensions such as power distance and individualism have been part of the educational culture for years and have had a negative impact on actual student learning. So there is a question of one size fits all. Local and migrant children will probably pursue higher education. However, due to the mentioned implications, students might not reach their potential. And this could have a negative impact on the level of human capital in Saudi Arabia and negatively affect its 2030 vision. Moreover, this could have an impact on students' own academic or career goals if they decide to move to another country. Therefore, necessary measures need to be taken to ensure that schools provide students, both locals and non-locals alike, with the knowledge and skills they need throughout their life. Now, the trend of borrowing educational models from the West will continue. And to help students adapt to these models, it's important to enhance their cognitive abilities. For this to be achieved, I do suggest that the Ministry of Education prioritizes Bloom's taxonomy and ensures it's an integral component of the 18-hour teacher training program that has been proposed for public schools this year and this has been proposed by the National Transformation Program. This will help raise teachers' awareness of the pedagogies involved when developing their students' higher order thinking skills. Moreover, these sessions need to be hands-on. They need to be hands-on. They need to be practical for teachers to experience practical activities that they can implement with their own students. So, and further to this, sessions to raise awareness of developing student soft skills, a prerequisite for acquiring cognitive skills, may also be beneficial. Nevertheless, this teacher training program should not be limited to public schools. Training programs in other types of schools also need to be monitored by the Ministry of Education. I've worked in several schools here, both private Arabic and private international schools. And depending on the school's budget, there might be or there might not be a teacher training program. So it really does depend. And I think that teacher training needs to be monitored by the ministry to ensure that teachers are trained in order to offer students the education that they deserve. So I do suggest that teacher trainers conduct ongoing classroom observations after the training sessions, just to ensure that teachers are able to apply the practical strategies and techniques they were exposed to during the training sessions. Monitoring teacher performance is vital to ensure students are being empowered with analytical thinking and critical thinking skills while becoming independent learners. So the presence of well-planned and well-executed teacher training sessions, followed by monitoring teacher performance, could result in individuals who are better prepared for their future and who are empowered to achieve personal and nationwide goals. So this here is a list of the references that I referred to. And I'll also have a publication like what was mentioned earlier, and this will be out in December with the information presented today. And there will also be some additional information in that. So let's open the floor for questions. Oops.
Okay, thank you, Tazir. If you would like to ask a question, we can open your mic. Just raise your hand and we'll open your mic so you can ask the question.
Yes, you can have my email. That's fine by me. No problem. Should I just pop it in the chat box, Dr. Alia? I don't know. Let me know.
You can. Yeah, you can pop it in the chat box.
Okay, I'll do that. I'm more than happy to answer. Yeah.
Okay, Taysir, I'll go ahead and ask a question.
Yeah, please do.
Okay. As you can tell from my responses, this is a very hot topic for me.
Yes.
And I'm very much involved with this very issue and with training the faculty at Prince Sultan University around this very subject matter. So based on your experience from the British Council perspective, and you interact with people from many different institutions, just based on that experience, what is some advice that you could give us so that we can work on improving this process to make things better for the teachers and for the students?
So there needs to be an observation program. I'm not sure how frequent there are formal observations at the university, but for example, at the British Council, we do have 2 formal observations a year. So each teacher has 2 formal observations a year. And the observation process involves a pre-observation meeting, the observation itself, and a post-observation meeting. The pre-observation meeting is key, and that's when the teacher comes with his or her lesson plan and talks you through the lesson. You can give some input to guide the teacher away from doing something in particular that might not help in achieving the goal or might not actually be a student-centered lesson, for example. And we do ask teachers to focus, to put on their lesson plan 2 areas of development that they feel they need to develop in their teaching. This does not have to be linked to the actual lesson itself. It could be anything. Like, for example, it could be, is my lesson student-centered enough? Is there a lot of TTT in my lesson, for example? And then you have you do the observation, and then after that, the post-observation meeting, of course, is also key, in which you discuss the lesson and you also talk about the teacher's own developmental areas. And in that conversation, there needs to be suggestions as to what you, as an experienced observer, feel could help the teacher in order to develop in his or her teaching. It could be
thank you. I mean, everything that you have just described is something that is required. I mean, of course, at our institution, we do expect that for our faculty members. They have to, when we do the observations, there has to be a pre, then the observation, and then a post meeting, very similar to what you have described, but maybe it needs to be implemented across the kingdom and maybe even in the K through 12 schools. Thank you very much. Does anyone else have a question?
You're welcome. It's just about having that conversation. It needs to be an honest, an open, a transparent conversation. And the teacher needs to understand that the observation is not to get you into any kind of trouble. It's to help you develop as a teacher, because we want you to help your students. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Rayhana. Thank you, Sophia. Thank you for your comments.
Anyone else like to share or speak or ask a question? I can open your mic and you can talk.
Oh, thank you. Yes, okay.
She did add email. If you look in the chat box, the email is there.
Okay, I just popped my email.
Copy and paste it again, then maybe.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Taysir.
you're welcome. Twitter account, I do. This is my full name, and you'll find me on Twitter.
Hi, Ms. Taysir. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Dima. Sorry, is it Dima who's speaking? Sorry.
Sophia.
Thank you.
Not a problem. Very quick question. You mentioned at the end that teacher training should be overlooked by the ministry. And I do agree with this. However, the ministry is very large. How would they be able to overlook something which is very small and institutionalized?
Yeah, so that, go ahead, Dr. Dina.
No, this is Dr. Alia.
Dr. Alia, sorry.
Yeah, actually for English language teachers, the Ministry of Education already has an English language center, and they do have supervisors for English language teachers throughout the kingdom in the K through 12 school system. But we could always recommend ways of improving.
And so does that happen, like, how frequent does this happen every year?
I'm not certain how frequently it happens, but they do have, like, there is all English, every English language teacher is assigned a supervisor that is linked, and then this person is there to monitor what is happening in their classrooms. How frequent they go and observe, I'm not really certain, but I do know that this exists because I presented at a conference a couple of years ago, and it was in this regard, and I met a lot of the supervisors and the K through 12 English language teachers, and I know that this does happen.
As an outside party, Dr. Alia? So somebody from the Ministry of Education?
Yeah, somebody from the Ministry of Education, yes. Somebody is appointed as a supervisor, yes, for a certain, like, area or district, and then they are responsible for monitoring the school teachers in that area.
Oh, okay, great, thank you. I didn't know that. So just K to 12 and not at the higher education?
Correct.
Okay, sorry. Thank you.
And you know, something that we also do at the British Council is when a teacher delivers a weak lesson, there is a follow-up observation. And that follow-up observation would be in about 2 weeks' time. So yes, each teacher does get 2 formal observations done, but if a teacher is weak, then there has to be a follow-up observation, and the teacher needs to address those areas that need development immediately, because there are some bad habits that need to be unlearned, and students are being disadvantaged. So that's another thing. Monitoring teacher performance is very important. How that can happen on a large scale across country is something that, needs to be discussed, I believe. I just got a question. Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, someone sent a question about evaluation or something.
I already responded.
Oh, okay.
They will be emailed.
Okay.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions? Anything that they would like to share with Ms. Hasir? If not, thank you all for joining this workshop and the symposium today, and we look forward to you participating in our future events. And the evaluation for the symposium and certificates will be emailed to you after the symposium has completed. And thank you for your participation. I'm going to stop recording now.
Thank you very much, Dr. Alia, and I would like to thank you, and I'd like to thank the PSU College of Humanities for organizing this event, and it was an honor to be with you guys today. Thank you.
Thank you. It was our